94.3 Abuja, the station that plays every song. You're in a classic lounge on a Tuesday. It's the 28th day in the month of May 2024. My name is Faith and this is a Classic Lounge. Of course, I have been telling you all day that I have a special guest coming in today. It's exactly 1 p.m. at my time in the studios, which also means that it's time for us to get on with the show, with the interview I told you was going to happen, the long-awaited interview. I have in the studio the DG for the NBC, that is the National Broadcast Commission. Okay, Mr. Charles Ebuebu.
Yes, please.
Okay. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Good to have you join us on the show. And also, I'm excited to say that this is his first radio interview. So we are glad that we are doing the honors, for the first time on radio as the DG for the NBC. You got into this job, it was late last year.
Yeah, October. To be precise.
Fantastic. What's a date to my birthday, but who's counting? But it's great to have you on the show. And one of the things that, I know about you is that you are a lawyer by profession and you have been doing that for a while, but you've also dabbled in the media. Okay, but my question as we start off, we have a lot to talk about, but as we start off, is going to be asking how you're doing this, from the legal profession, because the first time I saw your appointment, he's not a media person per se, but okay, you know what, maybe that's not a bad deal, but I want to know what your experience, is like. But before that, let me also just let you know that our stations in Lagos and Port Harcourt are tuned in, so we are broadcasting across 3 different regions in the country. So we'll have an interesting conversation as we also talk to them as the show progresses. So back to my question: as a lawyer, taking on this role, how has it been, for you, and what is the new thing that you're bringing in, especially because it's media, it's broadcasting?
Okay, so let me talk a bit about my background, because that brings to play the experience I bring to the table. Basically, like you said, I am a lawyer, and I am an IP lawyer, really. I've worked in law firms, I've worked in media houses, I've been the head of legal, I was head of licensing of channels and content, I've worked in a broadcast technology company, I have run my own law firm, and here I am. So basically, when you ask me what I'm bringing to the table, there's been a lot of learnings, in the industry. I have done on the background, I have done a lot of research into what is missing in the Nigerian media industry. When you talk about regulation, you talk about content, you talk about funding, what is skewed, what is wrong with our industry, why does a jurisdiction like South Africa seems to massively progress in terms of advertising revenue, in terms of regulation, what are we missing? So I've done a lot, prior, without the knowledge, I'll be here today. As the DG of the NBC, and all of that, all the learnings is what I'm bringing to the table, with the fact that even the NBC needs to be repositioned in terms of learning, in terms of skill gaps that we need to bridge, and in terms of professionalism, best practices that we need to put in place. All of that, in a nutshell, by way of an overview, is what I'm bringing to the table.
Fantastic. Let's talk about it, because I was going through, the functions of the NBC, what you're supposed to do. It is a lot. Yes. What do you think about that? Do you think the NBC is overburdened, or you think the NBC can handle everything that it is supposed to do by law?
Oh, certainly. It's up to the task, if that's what you're asking. The NBC, by the act that, establishes the commission, mandates, the regulation of broadcasting and the control of that space in a nutshell. There's a lot that comes into that.
There's content, there's so
content,
much.
There's, advertising in a way where we relate with ACON. There's so many aspects of content regulation. As if that is not enough, then the DSO kicks in with the ITU regulations, for which we have the NBC had tried to get going. Right now, we've covered about 8 states, but now we have been given a mandate by the president, basically, to get it done. So what we're doing in that space for the DSO is to review all the plans, challenges, the shortcomings that occurred in the past, and come out with one solution that will make the DSO a self-funded model, wherein we do not need to go back to government for more funding. We have to run it it has to be run like a business. Now, as a regulator, that seems to be challenging, because when we stick solely on all fours with our mandates, there are other aspects. You have to talk about content. What kind of content needs to be there? What kind of revenue model do you put in place? So we've had to think outside the box for a bit to put together an ecosystem that works in that space. That's for the DSO. We look at advertising. What is lacking there? Why are free-to-air broadcasters, for example, not having protection? All over the world, there's some kind of protection in that space.
Yes.
That is one of our core responsibilities. We're looking at that. Then you move over to the issue of advertising. Why is it that their advertising is not getting to them? Why are they instead? Why do you have free-to-air licenses dispensing airtime, prime time, and all of that? That's not where the core of their revenue is in advertising. So we're trying to address the issues that affect or bring about the shortfall, because whether you look at it, you shouldn't look at it as stopping with the licenses only. Collectively, it's an industry revenue that impacts on government, right? And if there's some limitation or some factors that are causing a limitation in that space, it has to be addressed. So we're also looking into that, as well as so many other issues.
Other things. Talking about revenue now, it brings me to this question where I am wondering, if the NBC is just solely focused, on revenue. A lot of the time, especially when you have, that's fine. So we're going to talk about that more, as we progress on the show. That's definitely something we have to talk about. But when you look at the fines and you look at the sanctions and things like that, a lot of the time they're monetary, sanctions. The way the NBC prioritizes that, or the way the NBC focuses on that, it would look like the NBC prioritizes raising revenue more than the other functions that the NBC is supposed to have.
No, I would say I differ on your viewpoint, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes when you carry out your role, the perception that's put out there might take away other areas of what you're involved in. So even to the fines you talk about, that only constitutes about 20% of the NBC's revenue. The NBC really is not a fully funded government agency, you must know. We're funded only to the part of payroll. So every other thing has to be internally generated revenue. But, fines and it. So the objective is not the way you say like other agencies, we give fines for revenue. That's not it. We're trying to push to people, licensees, that you have a responsibility when you go on air, not to drive rhetorics or narratives that will tip people over the edge. My way of saying it. When you're conscious that when you pass out messages, it is being received, the way it is interpreted, what is the outcome of even if it's unintended consequences. So you have to put that perception in mind. Now, over time, even the Broadcasters Organization of Nigeria will agree with me that professionalism, that even the responsibility I talked about has been lost. People become more conscious of their own clout, on-air personalities, and they go out there and just lay down without having a view of where it is going to go at the end of the day. Do you do fact checking? Do you verify? Do you give the same amount of time from when you get information from one source to the other source to be able to have a balanced view? So many things. Some people just get, in chasing clout, take some information, garnish it a bit, social media, here we go, and the damage is done. So you see, our pushback is probably what brought that perception. But what we're putting together a different approach to it. We're more engaging. We would engage more with the public, more with licenses. We want to push that, that idea of that I just passed across to people, so that we do not every time have to go in and sanction. That's what we're trying to change.
So more engagement,
exactly.
Than the sanctioning. That's why I want to ask you how you're doing where that is concerned. This is, you're in this new role. So are you meeting with media people? Are you talking to people who have licenses? Are you trying to engage, especially, and even trainings? That's another thing that the NBC can get involved in, at least to make sure that you don't always come across as the person who brings the hammer.
Okay, so we have already put in place a lot of those initiatives. Like we just finished with the campus, with licenses in the campus space, and then community licensing, where we had to, if you will, re-emphasize the mandates in those spaces. Because, for example, you had people within the community broadcasting saying they want to go commercial. The issue is that you cannot have that license and go commercial. There's a perspective and a mandate for that. When you go outside that, you violate your license. So rather than wait until there's a violation, we actually engage. We have met with media executives. We've had, direct talk, where they talked about even the issue of sanctioning, the issue of the 5% gross annual revenue for which they're supposed to pay to the government and the NBC, not just the NBC, if you must know. And I'd made the perspectives clear, because the expectation out there for that is that the NBC has the authority to just change those rates. There was a process that was put in place before it got into the code. We cannot go back historically and address that. What we could do is going forward, and that's looking into the present state of the economy, the economic challenges they have, like power. They've come to me to make an intervention, to which I had given advice, and together as a body, we will, meet the appropriate authority. We could go to the minister and lay, their demands, and whatever government could do, we're good. Our doors are open. We're listening to everybody. So it's a shift from, we listen more. We do not wait for you. In cases where we've seen subtle violation with the regulations of the code, we have just called, you're doing this wrong. We've issued a warning. It doesn't have to get to a sanction. Ideally, the sanction is,
last resort.
Exactly, because we even have steps in the code that says what is class A, class B, and all that. It's just that a lot of people have lost sight over that. So when you do it, you're looked at as being arbitrary. So what we're doing is like a re-education, re-engagement with the public.
So are you saying, because we have to go on and break very quickly because we have the headline news coming up, but I just want to get this in very quickly. Are you saying that the perception that people have with the NBC, whether you're talking about media stakeholders or you're talking about people in general in the country, are you saying that it is one-sided? The NBC has got nothing to do with that. It's just about you not understanding what we're doing. Is that what you're saying?
Not really. Sometimes, so I'll put a balance to it. I'm not saying the NBC is completely innocent of, what I mean is that, like I said, sometimes in doing your job, you're looked as being overreaching because there's no communication. So what I think is that there should have been more engagement. There should have been more, going out to engage, whether by way of training, whether by way of meeting the various sector heads, whether it is in advertising, brand management, licenses, whatever, stakeholders everywhere. There should be more of that perception passed out with, editorials and all that, what we're doing, where the NBC is trying to push back on certain excesses. If a lot of that had been out there, we'll probably not have been looked at like. So we have a job to do, but we need the public to go with us. We're on a journey together, basically.
We are going to be joined by our Lagos counterpart very shortly, to also get their question across to you on, the different issues with NBC and the media, because that's basically what we are discussing today. But right before I do that, I just want to ask you about the NBC Act that is pending before the National Assembly. Where is that at? And also, the contentious social media regulation, is it still part of it, and are you reworking it, or is it just as is?
Okay,
back then?
So right before I came in, the act had gone through first reading, and it was about to go through second reading when I came on board. So when I looked at it, my background as an IP lawyer, I decided there was some input that I need to make in there also. So we had to hold the process, and we're going to make a second input on that before it goes for second reading and then the public hearing. So to your second question about social media regulation, I know that phrase regulation is a catchy word and people tend to hear that and nothing else. But I'll tell you, we're having a second look at it. We're reworking it. We're looking at the best practices, put in place all over the world. We're looking at other interventions that were put in place, again, all over the world. And then we're going to adopt something that works for Nigeria, definitely. It's not to stifle, the perception out there, not to stifle freedom of information, but to also pass across that there's a responsibility that goes about it, and people should be moderate in their broadcast in that space.
So basically, you are going to not be try to impede people's freedom of speech, and trying to make sure that, oh no, you can't say this or you can't say this. You're just trying to moderate, not to regulate. You prefer that word?
Yes.
You're sounding really nice about all of this. We'll see what
Don't worry,
we'll
look into it.
We'll
I'm sure
look
you agree
back
with us what we're
after 1 year of your tenure.
Yes.
We will. Okay, so I have my Lagos counterparts, on the line, Lolo, and she will be talking to you. Welcome to the show, Lolo. How are you?
Hi, babe. How's it going?
It's going very well. Great to have you. So
Yes.
the floor is yours.
It's not that funny to see you, Lagos. Good afternoon to you and your group. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so some of the provisions in the amendment are being criticized as hampering the general principle of freedom of thought to contract. So it's basically the mandate that has stop live broadcasting to third parties, and that is generally stifling.
Okay, you're talking about parts of the NBC Act that are stifling.
Okay, so if I get you right, your question relates to one, the freedom of information, where people are free to share their thoughts. Your question relates to the fact that the regulations are a bit stifling. And if I get the second question has to do with sub-licensing of programs, am I right?
Yes, I would say that.
Okay, so right about the point I was appointed, I think that's where ECOWAS came out with the judgment, basically to the point that our code on one hand is too vague and it seems to have the intention of stifling the freedom of information and all that. Now, as part of the process for us we're taking a second look at the code itself. Now, like I said, if you know the process where the code gets amended, is the fact that there's an in-house review process where we even bring in industry experts, be it in the aspect of law, finance, and all of that, to look at it and give us, basically point us in the right direction as to where the world is, the best practices that is applicable everywhere. So we're going to put that in place and then call for a public forum where we would hear the inputs, position papers, what have you, from licenses, from stakeholders, organizations all over the world. That is a practice before all of that is consolidated and a final report comes for which the code is then amended. That is going to take place. So we put in several processes to be able to address those concerns. You would, and I'm sure you'll be part of it. Now, concerning the sub-licensing of content, now what the code does mandate is actually only in the aspects of news and sports, basically saying you would share content when there's no exclusivity in that space. That is a regulation that was made basically to address issues of an imbalance that does not allow competition to thrive in the Nigerian broadcast space. So again, we're going to hear inputs when we do the code review. We're going to see what people have to say, matching it against best practices and interventions that regulators have put in place to address those concerns also, and we'll find a balance to it, I'm sure. Okay, thank you. My pleasure.
All right, Lolo, does that done, or you will call back later, when you have other questions?
Thank you.
All right then. Thank you very much, Lolo. And we'll continue with the conversation here. She might still be able to call in later. But if you also want to join the conversation, listen to us, you can call the numbers 0817-288-7943 or 0902-199-9943. Remember, you can also send WhatsApp messages to 0909-697-5943, to join the conversation. So let's move on with the conversation. The issue of the sub-licensing. So let me continue from there. It's fine. Right. Let me continue from there and ask about this, because I know that when this issue, came up of sharing content and things like that, the first question was, if people pay so much to acquire content, why would you want them to share it? If it's not going to be like, okay, you are the one giving them the content, why would you want them to share content that they pay so much for from their own, company revenue?
Okay, so this is the thing. For every country, every jurisdiction, there's policy in place to enable a level playing field and competition in that space, because it's when competition thrives that price comes into play. Who is able to give the best feature? Exactly. But where there's a point where such practices go overboard and stifle competition. Where, for example, if you have news news is supposed, by the word ordinarily, it's supposed to be everywhere, provided it is not restricted in the country. But where you allow a licensee have access to news, especially when he did not produce that, that content, it is acquired from a foreign provider, and it is something people want to watch. My question is, why do you then allow restrictive agreements to hold that back from reaching people?
But we're not talking about news, we're talking about sports. Which
there's news and sports. It's both of them.
I know it's both of them, but the one that generally affects, that people focused on mostly was sports. So I want you to speak to that, because sports, it's not.
Now, this is the thing. The code does not, it allows competition. Now, the reason, why do you want to have competition? Let's talk about that. It is the fact that you want, you want to drive viewership to your platform. Now, at the end of the day, you're a businessman and you want to make money from that, whether by subscription or any other business model you have. What the code is actually saying, it allows other platforms to allow that, call it a pipeline, where they have access to your view. So basically, if you have it on, just for way of analysis on this, channel A will then be applicable. Viewers will have access to it on other platforms, and you get paid. So it's exclusive to you still, but the issue is that it now enjoys a larger viewership. So
you're saying that it is not like you are going to just mandate them to give it out for free. You're going to say, okay, yes, people can pay you
definitely
to get it.
Definitely.
I think that was where the miscommunication came in.
Because it's not, again, if it restricts viewership. Now, if, for example, you have it on your platform alone and you have maybe 10 million subscribers, Nigeria is made up of over 200 million. And if half of that population wants to say, why should it be restricted to your platform alone? That's the argument. You do understand. So it is. So
it's not going to be an issue for them money-wise, because they can also make money off it.
Exactly.
I don't think that point was clear.
I think we need to speak about it some more.
I do think so. Okay. So let's talk about this, judgments by the High Court, talking about how the NBC cannot be judge, jury, executioner, in their own, case, where you are the one who has the rules, you are the one who issues a sanction, you are the one who collects the fines, and all of that. And the court says you can't do that. I know the NBC is appealing that. Can you speak to why the NBC is appealing that, why you want to continue in that trajectory, and what you think about that judgment?
So there are two sides to it. On one hand, there is administrative sanction, which is what is applicable for a traffic officer. You're in violation, they give you a ticket, you go to court. If you feel it was wrongly applied, you make your case and it will be either nullified or, the same thing with the police officer and all that. The fines we give, they are administrative, and we feel, it is actually that where you feel you have a case, you can go to court and have it, nullified. Now, I also understand the principle of law that you cannot be a judge and jury in your own case. So what we're doing, because out of that is also the perception that the NBC was a bit high-handed in applying those sanctions, and so the public did not see a transparent process in place. So what we're doing is, besides the application of sanctions, we're putting in place, just the same way you have with the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection. Yes, if you are dissatisfied with the sanctions, whatever sanctions, you could go to the tribunal, which is made up of other bodies outside the FCCPC. So they have an objective look at your complaints, and where they disagree, it has been known that the tribunal has overturned sanctions laid up by the FCCPC. So we're putting that in place. But to altogether rule that the NBC does not have a right to sanction, it's in our act. It's an abnormality, if you ask me. That's why we're taking the position to appeal it, because I don't think the right perspective was put in court at that time, the right arguments. So we're going to go back. We're going back. We're already pushing back on this. But at the same time, we're not letting it stand. We're going to address that part, where we cannot be a judge and jury in our own case, and put in processes where anybody who is dissatisfied with our sanction could simply appeal, and, it will be considered.
When the court is saying that we should be the ones who issue sanctions, say, so if you have a problem, the NBC, whether it's an administrative issue, you should go before the courts. You don't see it that way.
Now, let me flip that role in a way. If the NBC had to go to court before it sanctions anyone, do you know what that we will basically all we would have is paying legal fees? And you know what it's like today. So the NBC on one hand will be stopped from carrying out its mandate, because what has happened, let me say it now that the courts had given those restrictive orders or judgments, some licensees, especially when it comes to elections and when it comes to some of normal broadcasts, they've gone overboard, and because they have this perception that what can the NBC do? You're restricted. So they previously, where there was some kind of check where people would double check before they take an action or put something out there in the media space, they've basically gone overboard. But that's why we need to correct this, because without sanction, a broadcaster, and you have to go to court, you know how long it takes to apply, how before the court case gets assigned, the adjournment, the deed would have been done. The damage will be unquantifiable. So we need to get it right. That's
what you're feeling it.
Yes.
But I'll go back to the relationship that the NBC has with media. I think that is where all of this is stemming from. Because if there is no trust, trust that the NBC will be fair, and the way the NBC has issued sanctions after sanctions, in the years before, you now have people being, very, very defensive about it and saying, well, you do this arbitrarily, so we are going to also push back, which is where this is coming from. And so it all stems also from the relationship of the NBC. So let me ask you, do you think that the NBC can have, I know regulators have great relationships like that with the regulator. We look at the CBN and the banks, but there's still supposed to be some sort of, how would I put it? Some sort of cordial relationship. Like you should be able to work together, because you're in the industry together. You're trying to make sure that the industry works fairly for everyone. How do you think you're going to be able to do that? Because the NBC does not have a great relationship with the media. It hasn't up until now. So you have an uphill task.
Okay. So it's a difficult task, but it can be done. And we're doing it. Like I said, before the break, that what we need to do more is engagements, right? Which we're already doing. Number two, we're engaging with industry bodies like the Broadcasters Organization of Nigeria. We've had a lot of meetings between us, and they, for example, agreed for the need to put back professionalism into the industry. How we're going to do that, we might differ, but you see, the more we keep talking, we will get something together that we will all drive. Now, you agree, just like ICANN is in place. If you have an industry body that basically mandates, by whatever means, has its members act in certain ways, we would not have to sanction every time, So we're trying to establish that. It's not eroding our powers, but we're trying to bring out the fact that it's not all about sanctions. We need you to be responsible with your broadcasting. We need you, when you say certain things on air, whether it be by radio, TV, or whatever, there's that consciousness behind you that it might have an impact. So you're careful in choosing your words. You do not allow even, people who come on air to just say anything using your platform. You have to be responsible. There are several times people have just gone out there, said things, and have to double back, and basically saying I'm sorry sometimes doesn't do away with the damage. So we have to put in the fact that when people go out there, they have that consciousness that I have to be careful. Yes, you do not stifle freedom of speech, but also you could violate an existing law or somebody else's right. So you have to be responsible that way.
But let's talk about, the NBC itself.
Okay.
Being an agency, of government, the NBC is under the Ministry of Information, and you take instructions from the minister, whether it is about issuing licenses, the president has to sign off on it. The minister, can give instructions on what this person did or what they want you to do. As long as the NBC is not independent, it's going to be very hard to convince people that you're not working from a place of bias with the government, because the government is the one giving you instructions. Basically, the minister works for the president. That's the government. Don't you think it's about time the NBC starts to push for some sort of independence? Let's know that you are not tied to the Ministry of Information, because as long as you are, you're not going to make any headway in pushing a great relationship with the people that you're supposed to be working with in the media industry.
Well,
because we always see from us talking for the government.
Okay. Funny enough, I had a conversation a few days ago on the same subject. I think, let me tell you what we need to do. The fact remains that whether we're independent or not, in the scenario you've just painted, if we will show more professionalism with what we do, if we're able to put in processes, just like the same way you just talked about the fact that we're playing judge and jury in our own case, if we're able to put in processes so much so that we are held, accountable, subject to those laws and regulations, the perception will change, I will tell you. There are other agencies who are under government, and they have operated, in ways that, and have delivered to the expectations that public placed on them, that no one is talking about that, perception of you being controlled by the government. We're going to bring in a knowledge-driven regulator. We're going to be professional in our ways. We're going to have automation. There's a whole lot of things we have in the works that's going to change. So much so, you will not even remember we're an agency reporting to the Ministry of Information.
But to that again, here's the thing. The government also has its own media organizations, Federal Radio Corporation, National Television Authority. Are you able to regulate them when, you basically work for the same people?
Yes, we regulate
them. Do you have
them.
Different standards, for them?
No, definitely
not. And for,
absolutely
independent
not.
media?
We're all under the same ministry, the way we're all established, but they are licensees. We have known cases where some of this, I won't be specific here so as not to cast anyone, but the fact remains that some of these organizations, they've had reporters who had gone overboard and broke some rule, and we've had cause to write to them, and I will tell you, the DGs basically sanctioned those, and everybody, is falling in line. At the end of the day, once you cannot get away with certain things you do, even if it has been done all the time, you tend to fall in line.
So you're saying there's no bias. It's the same process that's going to apply for government media and independent media
Definitely.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure that the minister will not have an influence over your decisions?
The minister I worked with, I can tell you from when I was appointed till today, has not exerted any influence that would push my decision one way or the other. Instead, the minister I have right now would ask you, what does your code say? What do you do this? If you have a problem like this, how do you address it? That has been my relationship since I was appointed.
So let's talk about the code. I know you're also reworking that, not just the act. So
Okay.
what are the changes that you're looking to bring in, especially when broadcasters sometimes see your code as stifling of freedom of speech or freedom of the press?
Okay. So I will talk about that without letting the cat out of the bag.
Okay.
There's so many things. I mean, media is changing. I know you've not asked me that question yet, but I'll give you an example. When I had a meeting with the media CEOs, and their representatives, and there was this question that came up. For example, our revenue seems to be going to skit makers, and what is the NBC doing about it? And that shook me, because I think that's a misunderstanding of where media is going. Do you expect where an advertiser who wants to put out his product out there to take it away from where you have more eyeballs and stick with you? The fact is that the game has changed, but they have not changed. There's a lot of education that needs to come in. There's a lot of, when regulation is not really regulation, but I would say policy. Our media industry has to be policy driven, to bring knowledge, to bring industry change, to bring in technology. We've not even talked about where the role technology will play in our space yet, and it's already going there. There's so much that needs to be done, and you have a lot of smart people within the NBC, I can tell you. You have a lot of smart young people, So we're putting all of that in place. It's beyond regulation itself, so beyond the code. There's a lot of education, so we're going to be partnering. A lot of things have to do with finance, which we're a bit limited right now, but we're going to be partnering with a lot of organizations to bring that education, to bring that awareness, to help our media, our licensees, and the emerging ones on social media and all of that, to reposition themselves. The rules are changing. Social media broadcast is here. We're definitely looking into
So what about the digital switch over? When do you think that will happen? We've been hearing it's happening soon, we're switching soon.
Okay.
When is that happening?
So, like I said previously, there have been 2-3 attempts, and
yes,
what has been achieved right now is 8 states. Now, with the president's mandate to us, we've looked at the system holistically. There are a few things we cannot continue to do if we want to achieve, the greater picture. Basically, we cannot, for example, keep going state to state, launching transmitters. The cost of that is enormous, and basically the business model is not working for signal distributors. It's not working for the STB manufacturers, those who would bring in STBs. The content born, its members are like, where's the revenue? Where are the eyeballs? And so we're looking at everything. Where's audience measurement? That is not in place right now. We're bringing in audience measurement as we speak.
Fantastic.
It's going to be introduced. We're going to put in content into that space that it will be a bigger deal than what exists today, which will drive people in. We're going to create a market that would cost investment in decoders into that space. We're going to also put in a platform for the likes of the social, the online broadcasters, the Netflix of this world and all that, to be able to put their product on that box. It's going to be the same way you have your phone. Just think about when mobile phone was introduced. What is it now? It has taken the place of cameras. It is now.
So that means they're going to be having meetings with all them Netflix.
It's already going on.
It's already going on.
So we're going to introduce, and we're going to launch in a new way that basically covers the whole country at once, and then put in interventions here and there to make things work. We're not just, that's what I said, we're not just going to strictly be regulators. We're going to direct all the stakeholders and players on their roles and responsibilities, what they need to do. It has to be a self-funding model. It is not going to continue to rely on government revenue, because that's not sustainable.
Interesting. Yeah. So I have a question on WhatsApp about, NBC having issued so many licenses and will probably issue more. So what are you doing to ensure viability, of the media industry? This proliferation of licenses, I can't even count how many radio stations, TV stations that we have now.
Yes. Now, prior to this time, basically, almost everyone I know wants to get a license. For you know the reasons why, which and they come to that space with unrealistic projections on how you could get in today without doing the work, without doing the research and all. Some of them would just sell the licenses and all of that. But we've been having meetings, and what you're going to see in part of we're going to have immediate policies that will change now, and then some of it you will see in the code that will make it a place where only those who want to do the business will come in. It will not be an easy come, easy go, where you just hold the license and you hold it, you speculate, and then you sell it to the high bidder. We're putting in place checks to stop that. It's something that has to be done, and we coupled with the fact that it has to be with people who know what the business is about. It's on one hand it's a business, on the other hand it's a social product that has a lot of both cultural cohesion, all of that, education, enlightenment. We have to view it from both sides. So we're going to our regulations are going to be robust to make it a sustainable one, not something that's just commercial, and satisfies the pockets of a few people.
Okay, we have come to the end of this, but I would say one thing, that you sound very, very, amiable, like, oh, we're doing things differently. You can talk to me. This is how it's going to be now. The NBC is different and all of that. But like they say, the taste is in the eating, right? And the actions, they say, speaks louder than words. So we'll be checking back to see how you follow through on all things you've said, to see if your words matches your actions.
I want you to do that.
Okay, we'll be back here maybe in another year to see. I have been speaking with the DG for the National Broadcast Commission, that is Mr. Charles Ebuebu. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Stay with Classic FM. There is a lot of great music coming your way, as well as, of course, tidbits of information that you can use. This is Classic FM 94.3 Abuja, the station that plays every song my name is Faith, and you are in the Classic Lounge. Stay here.